The rifle felt like a dead friend's handshake. Petty Officer Second Class Nadia Okonkwo pressed her cheek to the stock that still held Marcus Chin's warmth, his blood drying on the scope housing, and sighted the first of 12 enemy fighters who stood between her team and survival. 400 meters. Crosswind gusting at 8 knots. Her father's voice echoed from 15 years and a lifetime ago. Squeeze, don't pull. She had sworn on her brother's wheelchair that she would never take another shot. That promise died with Chun. Now she would keep a different one. 48 hours earlier, the ammunition crate weighed 63 pounds, and Nadia felt every ounce of it in her lower back as she hauled it across the dusty compound at Forward Operating Base Sharana. The Afghan sun hammered down without mercy, turning the plywood buildings into ovens and the HESCO barriers into radiators that threw heat back at anyone foolish enough to walk too close. Sweat dripped from her chin onto the crate's metal surface, evaporating almost instantly. She was the only woman assigned to support SEAL Team 4's forward element, and after 3 months, she had learned exactly what that meant. It meant invisible when convenient. It meant present when blame needed assigning. It meant 63 pounds of ammunition across 200 meters of open ground while the men whose lives depended on these rounds sat in the shade of the operations center, laughing about something she would never be invited to hear. Before we go any further, drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from today. Maybe there are military families in your area who understand exactly what service and sacrifice look like. The laughter died as she approached. Chief Petty Officer Vincent Calhoun turned his shaved head toward her, tribal tattoo sleeve catching the light as he crossed his massive arms. Well, the pack mule returns. How many trips is that today, Okonkwo? 12? 15? 14, she said, keeping her voice flat. She had learned that showing anything, any emotion at all, only made it worse. 14. Calhoun looked at the others and shook his head. You know what I love about having logistic support? Means I don't have to carry my own gear. Like having a really expensive wheelbarrow that complains less. The younger SEAL, Petty Officer Second Class James Ostrowski, snorted. Doesn't complain at all, actually. Never heard her say a single word that wasn't answering a direct question. Maybe she's defective, Calhoun said. Factory error. Forgot to install the personality. Nadia set the crate down at the supply point and turned to walk back for another. She had 47 more to move before sunset, and standing here absorbing insults wasn't moving the count. A hand caught her arm. Not rough, just enough to stop her momentum. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Chun stood there, his sniper rifle slung across his back, eyes unreadable behind yellow-tinted shooting glasses. I'll walk with you. Calhoun's voice followed them. Oh, Chin's got himself a girlfriend. That's sweet. You gonna help her carry her purse too? Chin didn't respond, just matched Nadia's pace as they crossed the compound toward the remaining crates. When they were out of earshot, he spoke quietly. You know you could report that. What Calhoun does. It's textbook harassment. To whom? She kept her eyes forward. Your commander thinks professional detachment means pretending he doesn't hear it. And Calhoun's been with the team for 9 years. I've been here 3 months. Who do you think they believe? Chin was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I requested you specifically for tomorrow's mission. You're the most reliable logistics specialist on this base. Gear is always right. Counts are always accurate. She glanced at him, surprised. Why would you do that? Because competence matters more than politics. At least it should. They reached the supply point, and Chun helped her lift the next crate, taking the heavier end without being asked. As they walked, something caught Nadia's attention. Senior Chief Petty Officer Dale Rennick stood in the shadow of the communications building, phone pressed to his ear, body angled away from the compound like a man who didn't want to be overheard. His free hand cracked his knuckles rhythmically, nervous habit she'd noticed before. She filed it away as irrelevant. Whatever Rennick was doing, it wasn't her business. Nothing here was her business except moving crates and staying invisible. That night, after the sun had finally released its grip on the valley, Nadia sat on her cot in the cramped quarters she occupied alone. The female billeting was designed for 4, but she was the only woman on this rotation, which meant 3 empty cots staring at her like accusations. She pulled the photograph from beneath her pillow. A young man in a wheelchair smiled up at her from the faded image, his eyes bright despite everything. Kofi, her little brother, 23 years old now, though he would be frozen at 19 forever in this picture, taken 3 weeks after he left the rehabilitation hospital. 3 weeks after the bullet from her rifle severed his spine. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the photograph, as she did every night. "I'm still sorry." She tucked it away when footsteps approached outside. Lieutenant Commander Eric Westbrook appeared in her doorway, his expression professionally neutral. "Okonkwo, mission briefing at 0600. You're accompanying the team as ammunition bearer. Full combat load." "Yes, sir." He hesitated, seeming like he wanted to say something else, then simply nodded and walked away. Across the compound, Chen caught her eye through the darkness between buildings. He nodded once, encouraging. She felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope exactly. Something smaller. The possibility that tomorrow might be different. She didn't know how right she was. She just didn't know that different would mean better. The briefing room smelled like stale coffee and nervous sweat. Nadia stood at the back, behind the SEALs who occupied every chair, her presence acknowledged by exactly no one except Chun, who had saved her a spot along the wall where she could see the mission map. Lieutenant Commander Westbrook stood at the front, pointer in hand. Gomel Valley, 11 kilometers northeast. Intelligence suggests a significant weapons cache in this compound. He tapped a satellite image showing mud brick buildings cluster at the base of a ridge. Local assets report increased activity over the past week. "We're going in to confirm and, if necessary, neutralize." Calhoun leaned back in his chair. "Rules of engagement?" "Standard. Weapons free if engaged. Otherwise, confirm hostile intent before firing. We want the cache intact if possible." Lots of questions about where these weapons are coming from. Nadia studied the map. The valley was narrow, steep ridges on both sides. Good terrain for an ambush if anyone knew they were coming. She noted the limited extraction routes, the lack of cover between the landing zone and the objective. Her father had taught her to read terrain before she learned to read books. This ground worried her. Senior Chief Rennick spoke from the corner. "Communications check at 0530. I'll have satellite uplink confirmed before we lift off." Something in his voice caught Nadia's attention. A slight tremor, barely perceptible. His knuckles cracked in that nervous rhythm she had noticed before. She filed it away with the phone call from yesterday. Probably nothing. Probably just pre-mission jitters that even experienced operators felt. Westbrook continued assigning roles. "Chun, you're Overwatch. Find a position with eyes on the compound and the ridge lines. Calhoun, you've got point on entry. Ostrowski, rear security." He paused, eyes finding Nadia at the back of the room. "Okonkwo, your ammunition bearer. Full combat load, plus additional for the team. Stay close to the main element. Distribute as needed." Calhoun snorted. "Try to keep up, pack mule." Chen's jaw tightened, but Westbrook was already moving on. Insertion at 0700. Questions? There were none. The team filed out, leaving Nadia alone with the mission map. She stared at those ridge lines for a long moment, that feeling of wrongness settling deeper into her gut. The next hours blurred into preparation. She loaded her pack with ammunition, water, medical supplies, and backup batteries for the communications equipment. 62 pounds when she finished. She would carry it without complaint. She always did. Outside the supply building, she encountered a scene that made her stop. 3 private military contractors had cornered the young Afghan interpreter, a boy named Farhan, who could not have been older than 17. They were laughing as one of them flicked the boy's ear, mocking his accented English. "Say it again. Say helicopter. Come on, say it right this time." Farhan's eyes darted around, looking for escape. His face burned with humiliation. Nadia set down her pack and walked toward them. The contractors didn't notice her until she was standing directly beside Farhan. "Is there a problem here?" The largest contractor, a bearded man with wraparound sunglasses, looked down at her with amusement. "This doesn't concern you, sweetheart. Run along and fetch something. Nadia held his gaze. This interpreter is essential to tomorrow's mission. If he's too rattled to translate accurately because some contractors thought bullying a teenager was entertaining, that affects my team's safety. So actually, it does concern me. The contractor's smile faded. You threatening me? I'm informing you. Walk away. Something in her voice, some steel that surprised even her, made the man hesitate. He looked at his companions, then back at her. Whatever. Kid's boring anyway. They wandered off, still laughing, but moving on to find other entertainment. Farhan looked at Nadia with something like wonder. Thank you. They do this often. No one stops them. She picked up her pack. You did nothing wrong. Remember that. From across the compound, Dakyaboa had witnessed the exchange. The combat medic watched her walk away, his expression thoughtful, reassessing. That night, sleep came for Nadia like an enemy she could not defeat. She found herself back in the Texas Hill Country, autumn leaves crunching under her boots, her father's rifle warm in her hands. Kofi was ahead of her, excited about his first real hunt, 17, and convinced he was invincible. Movement in the brush. She shouldered the rifle. Her father's training was automatic. Target acquisition. Breath control. Squeeze, don't pull. The shot echoed across the hills. The deer she expected to see fall didn't exist. Instead, Kofi crumpled, his scream tearing through the morning air, blood spreading across the autumn leaves like spilled paint. Nadia woke, gasping, her hand pressed against her mouth to muffle the cry that wanted to escape. The photograph of Kofi had fallen from beneath her pillow. She picked it up with trembling fingers. 3 months from Olympic trials. Ranked 4th in the nation in precision rifle. A future so bright it had seemed inevitable. All of it gone in the space between heartbeats, destroyed by a single moment of carelessness. She had not touched a competition rifle since. Had not fired any weapon except during mandatory Navy qualifications, where she deliberately scored average to avoid attention. The gift her father had given her, the talent that had defined her identity, she had buried it like a body she was ashamed to claim. Logistics was her penance. Carrying weight for others. Serving without shooting. Being useful without being dangerous. I'll never pull that trigger again, she had promised Kofi in the hospital, holding his hand while machines beeped and doctors delivered verdicts like death sentences. I swear on everything I am. She meant it then. She meant it still. Dawn came slowly, painting the mountains pink and gold. Nadia geared up in silence, checking and rechecking her load. The helicopter rotors began their warm-up whine across the compound. Shin found her at the landing zone. You ready? She adjusted her pack straps. I'm always ready. He studied her face for a moment, seeing something there she thought she had hidden. Whatever you're carrying that's heavier than that pack, you could put down someday. Just so you know. Before she could respond, the call came to load up. The team piled into the helicopter, Nadia taking the seat nearest the door where the spray of dust was worst. No one offered her a better position. She didn't expect them to. As the bird lifted off, she caught Rennick pulling a small device from his pocket, checking something on its screen before tucking it away. His eyes met hers for just a moment, and something flickered there. Annoyance. Maybe fear. She looked away first, telling herself it meant nothing. The helicopter banked toward Gomel Valley, carrying them toward a trap that was already set and waiting. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of brown dust that coated everything and everyone. Nadia was moving before the skids fully settled, hauling her 62-pound pack on her shoulders and following the team into the sparse cover of a dried riverbed. The bird lifted off immediately, the sound of its rotors fading into the mountain silence. Westbrook hand-signaled the formation. Chun broke off toward a rocky outcrop that would give him overwatch of the valley. Calhoun took point, Ostrowski falling in at the rear. The rest of the team spread into a tactical column with Nadia positioned in the middle, close enough to distribute ammunition but far enough from the front to stay out of the way. Calhoun set a brutal pace. The terrain rose and fell without mercy, loose rocks shifting underfoot, the altitude making every breath a conscious effort. Nadia's pack straps dug into her shoulders. Sweat soaked through her uniform within the first kilometer. She kept up. She always kept up. 3 kilometers in, Calhoun called a brief halt. The team took a knee, scanning the ridgelines while catching their breath. Nadia used the moment to study the terrain ahead. The valley narrowed significantly, steep walls rising on both sides. Perfect channelization. If someone wanted to trap a patrol, this was exactly where they would do it. She found herself moving toward Westbrook before she consciously decided to speak. "Sir." He looked at her with mild surprise. "Okonkwo." The terrain ahead. The valley narrows to maybe 50 meters. Limited cover. If anyone knew we were coming, that's where they would set up. Westbrook studied her for a moment. "And what makes you qualified to assess tactical terrain?" The words almost came out. "My father was Senior Chief Okonkwo. 18 years as a SEAL. He taught me to read ground before I could read books." But saying that meant explaining why she was hauling ammunition instead of doing something that used those skills. "Just an observation, sir." She stepped back. "Probably nothing." Calhoun had overheard. "The pack mule thinks she's a tactician now." He shook his head. "Stick to carrying things, Okonkwo. Leave the thinking to people who get paid for it." But Westbrook was looking at the valley ahead with new eyes. "Chin, you have eyes on that choke point?" Chin's voice came through the radio, calm and professional. "Affirmative. I've got overwatch. Ridgelines look clear, but there's a lot of dead ground I can't see into." Westbrook nodded slowly. "We proceed with caution. Calhoun, slow the pace through the narrows." The team moved out. Calhoun shot Nadia a look of pure irritation as he passed. She had made him look less observant than the ammunition bearer. He would make her pay for that later. The compound came into view an hour later. Mud brick walls, rusty metal gate, silence that felt deliberate rather than natural. Nadia counted windows, doorways, potential fighting positions. Her father's voice whispered in her memory. "Every building is a puzzle. Find the pieces before you step inside." Westbrook deployed the team around the perimeter. Chun confirmed his overwatch position 400 meters out. Scope trained on the compound and the surrounding terrain. Rennick hung back near a cluster of boulders, fiddling with his communications equipment. Nadia positioned herself behind a low wall, ammunition ready for distribution. From here, she could see Rennick clearly. He had his back to the team, phone pressed to his ear again. His lips moved rapidly, urgently. She caught fragments carried on the thin mountain air. "Gomel." "Confirmed. 20 minutes." The words meant nothing to her. Coordinates, maybe. Timeline for something. She was the ammunition bearer. Whatever Rennick was doing was above her pay grade and beyond her concern. Calhoun's team breached the compound gate. The next few minutes were controlled chaos as they cleared room by room, calling out status updates. "Clear. Clear. Possible cache. South building." Nadia moved with the flow, staying out of the way, but keeping ammunition accessible. The compound's interior was a maze of small rooms, dusty and abandoned looking, but with signs of recent activity. Fresh boot prints in the dirt. Food wrappers that hadn't yet faded in the sun. Someone had been here. Recently. The question was where they had gone. The weapons cache exceeded expectations. Crates of rifles, RPGs, ammunition, explosives. Enough to arm a small militia. Westbrook called it in while Calhoun's team began documenting and cataloging. "This is bigger than we expected," Westbrook said. "Command wants us to stay and do a full inventory." Extraction pushed to 1800. That meant 8 more hours in this valley. 8 more hours in terrain that made Nadia's instinct scream. She looked at the ridgelines, at the narrow approach they had used, at all the places where enemies could hide and wait. Chen's voice crackled over the radio. "Commander, I'm seeing movement on the East Ridge. Could be nothing. Could be goats. But it's movement." Westbrook tensed. "Keep eyes on it. Everyone else, maintain security, but continue the inventory." Nadia found herself drifting toward Rennick's position. She didn't know why. Curiosity, maybe, or something deeper, some instinct she couldn't name. He was still near those boulders, his equipment spread around him, but he wasn't looking at any of it. He was looking at the East Ridge, and he was smiling. The expression vanished when he noticed her watching. "What do you want, Okonkwo?" Just checking if you need any batteries, Senior Chief. She kept her voice neutral. Communications equipment drains fast in the field. I'm Euphina. He turned away dismissively. Go carry something. She walked back toward the compound, but something had shifted in her mind. That smile, the phone calls, the fragments she had overheard. They were adding up to a sum she didn't want to calculate. The first RPG came screaming out of the East Ridge and exploded against the compound wall in a shower of mud, brick, and fire. Then the gunfire started, pouring down from 3 directions at once, and Nadia realized with horrible clarity that her instincts had been right. They had walked into a trap, and someone had held the door open. The world became noise and dust, and the wet sound of bullets hitting mud brick. Nadia threw herself behind a crumbling wall as rounds snapped through the air where her head had been a half-second before. Her pack caught on something, yanking her backward, and she twisted free with desperate strength. Calhoun was screaming orders. Contact east, contact north, contact west. We're surrounded. Fall back to the main building. The team moved with practiced precision despite the chaos. Fire and maneuver. Cover and advance. These men had trained for this exact scenario 1,000 times. But training assumed you knew the enemy was coming. Training assumed you had not walked into a prepared kill zone. Westbrook took 3 rounds to the chest as he crossed the courtyard. His body armor stopped 2 of them. The third found the gap near his shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him in the dust. Commander down, someone shouted, "Doc, we need you." Nadia was already moving. She reached Westbrook before Doc Yaboa, grabbing the commander's drag handle and hauling him toward the main building with strength she did not know she possessed. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet. Something tugged at her sleeve, sharp and hot. She did not stop to check if she was hit. Doc slid in beside her as she pulled Westbrook through the doorway. He's alive. Shoulder wound, possible arterial involvement. I need space to work. The building offered minimal cover. Windows on 3 sides. A partial roof that would not stop plunging fire. But it was better than the open courtyard where 2 other team members already lay motionless. Chen's voice crackled through the radio, calm despite everything. I count 12 shooters in prepared positions. Elevated fighting holes, interlocking fields of fire. They knew exactly where we would be. The implication hung in the static. This was not a chance encounter. This was an ambush planned by someone who knew their route, their timing, their objective. Nadia pressed her back against the wall and forced herself to think. Her pack. 62 pounds of ammunition that meant nothing if she could not get it to the men who needed it. She shrugged off the straps and began sorting. Rifle magazines here. Grenades there. Medical supplies for Document Calhoun appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. Give me 4 mags. She handed them over without a word. He looked at her with something that was not quite respect, but was no longer contempt. You're not panicking. Panicking doesn't move the count. He almost smiled. Then gunfire intensified, and he was gone, back to the fight. Ostrowski went down next. The young SEAL had been providing cover fire from a window when a round caught him in the thigh, shattering his femur. His scream cut through the noise of battle, high and terrible. Doc was still working on Westbrook. Nadia made the decision without thinking. She grabbed the medical kit from her pack and ran to Ostrowski's position, sliding through broken glass and spent brass to reach him. Tourniquet, she said, already pulling it from the kit. High and tight. This is going to hurt. Ostrowski grabbed her arm, his grip desperate. Don't let me die here. Please. I have a daughter. She's 3. You're not dying today. She cinched the tourniquet with practiced efficiency, the training from her Navy combat medical courses finally finding purpose. The bleeding slowed. Not stopped, but slowed. Enough. Chen's rifle cracked from his overwatch position, methodical and precise. Each shot meant 1 less enemy. But there were too many of them, and Chen was 1 man with limited ammunition. I'm running low, Chen reported. Maybe 20 rounds left. And I've got an enemy sniper on the South Ridge, trying to find my position. Nadia looked at the ammunition in her pack. Rifle rounds for Chen's weapon. But he was 400 meters away across open ground that was now a killing field. Rennick appeared beside her, his face pale. We need a call for extraction. QRF can be here in 2 hours. 2 hours. They would be dead in 20 minutes at this rate. Do it, Calhoun ordered. Get on that radio and get us out of here. Rennick moved to his communications equipment, but something in his movements was wrong. Too slow. Too deliberate. Like a man going through motions he knew would not matter. Chen's voice again, sharper now. Enemy sniper has my position. I am relocating. The crack of a high-powered rifle echoed across the valley. Different from the others. Heavier. More distant. Chen's radio went silent. Nadia felt the moment stretch into eternity. She had seen death before, had caused it in a way that still woke her screaming. But this was different. Chen had been kind to her. Chen had seen her as a person when no one else bothered to look. Someone get eyes on Chun, Calhoun demanded. Chun, report. Static. Nadia moved to a window facing Chen's last position. Through the dust and smoke, she could see the rocky outcrop where he had set up. A figure lay motionless among the boulders. He's down. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Flat and distant. Chen is down. The team absorbed the news in silence. Their sniper was gone. Their commander was bleeding out. They were surrounded by enemies who had known they were coming. Calhoun looked at the remaining men, counting assets, calculating odds. His expression told Nadia everything she needed to know about their chances. We dig in, he said. Hold until QRF arrives. Conserve ammunition. Make every shot count. Rennick's radio crackled with the response from base. QRF is 2 hours out minimum. Road is blocked by IED. They're working on an alternate route. 2 hours. Against 12 enemies in prepared positions with unlimited ammunition and the high ground. Nadia looked at Chen's rifle, still visible on the outcrop beside his body. A precision weapon that could change everything. If someone could reach it, if someone could use it. But she had made a promise written in her brother's blood on autumn leaves in Texas. She would keep that promise. She had to, even if keeping it meant watching everyone around her die. The enemy probed their defenses with patient cruelty. A burst of fire from the east. A single shot from the north. Testing. Waiting. They knew time was on their side. Nadia pressed herself against the interior wall, listening to the radio chatter that painted a picture of slow suffocation. Ammunition counts dropping. 2 men dead in the courtyard, unrecoverable. Westbrook drifting in and out of consciousness while Doc fought to keep him alive. Ostrowski whimpering through clenched teeth as the tourniquet did its terrible, necessary work. And Chun, still out there on the rocks, still holding the rifle that could change everything. Calhoun organized what remained of the defense. 4 SEALs still combat effective, plus Rennick on communications and Nadia on ammunition distribution. Against 12 enemies with elevated positions, prepared fighting holes, and no reason to rush. They're going to wait until dark, Calhoun said. Then they'll move in close and finish it. Doc looked up from Westbrook's shoulder. He's stable for now, but he needs surgery within 6 hours or he loses the arm. Maybe more. Then we hold for 6 hours. We don't have the ammunition, Nadia said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. At current rate of fire, we're dry in 40 minutes. Maybe an hour if we're disciplined. Calhoun's jaw tightened. Then we fix bayonets and make them pay for every inch. It was bravado, and everyone knew it. Bravado was all they had left. Nadia found herself staring at the window, facing Chen's position. 400 meters of open ground. Certain death for anyone who tried to cross it. But the rifle was there. The ammunition was there. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice that sounded like her father whispered that 400 meters was nothing for someone who had once hit targets at twice that distance. She crushed the thought before it could fully form. That person was dead. She had killed that person the same day. She put a bullet in her brother's spine. Movement at the window caught her attention. One of the SEALs, a quiet operator named Harmon, was trying to get an angle on the south ridge. The enemy sniper who had killed Chen was still out there, still hunting. The crack came before anyone could shout a warning. Harmon's head snapped back, and he crumpled without a sound. Everyone down, Calhoun roared. Stay away from the windows. They were being picked apart, one by one. The enemy sniper had found their building, and was systematically eliminating anyone who showed themselves. Rennick's voice cut through the chaos. QRF update. Still 90 minutes out. They're taking fire on the alternate route. 90 minutes. They will be corpses in 90 minutes. Nadia crawled to where Chen's body lay visible through the window. The sniper rifle was right there, stock gleaming dully in the afternoon sun. Chen's blood had pooled beneath him, already drying in the mountain air. She had known him for 3 months. He had been kind to her for 3 months. Now he was gone, and his kindness had died with him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." She did not know if she was talking to Chun or to Kofi. The memory came unbidden. That morning in Texas, the autumn leaves turning gold and red, her brother's excitement as they tracked the deer through her father's property. She had been so confident, so certain of her skills. Junior and national champion, Olympic hopeful, the best young precision shooter in the state, maybe the country. The movement in the brush had been so quick. She had reacted on instinct, all those thousands of hours of training compressed into a single moment of muscle memory. Sight alignment, breath control, trigger squeeze. The deer she expected to see fall was her brother. The sound he made when the bullet hit him was nothing like the movies. It was small and surprised, almost a question. Then he was falling, and she was screaming, and the rifle was dropping from her hands like it had burned her. 3 surgeries, 8 months of rehabilitation. A wheelchair he would never leave. And through all of it, Kofi never blamed her. That was the worst part. He forgave her completely, absolutely, without reservation. She could not forgive herself. "I'll never shoot again," she had promised him. "I swear on everything I am." She had kept that promise for 10 years. Through Navy boot camp, where she deliberately failed to qualify as expert despite her abilities. Through deployments where she volunteered for logistics duty that kept her far from any weapon. Through 3 months at this godforsaken base, hauling ammunition for men who saw her as less than human. The promise was all she had left of the person she used to be. Breaking it would mean admitting that person had never really died, that she had just been hiding, running, pretending that carrying enough weight would somehow balance the scales. Another burst of gunfire. Another SEAL crying out in pain. Doc scrambling to help, spreading himself too thin across too many wounded. Nadia looked at the rifle, looked at the men dying around her, looked at her own hands, steady despite everything. She could end this. She knew she could. 400 meters to Chen's position, retrieve the rifle, find the enemy sniper, take him out. Then the others, one by one, the way her father had taught her. The way she had practiced 10,000 times before she buried that part of herself. But the promise, Kofi's face in the hospital, the wheelchair, the guilt that never faded, never diminished, never let her breathe. Calhoun slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle, his movements sharp with frustration. "We need that sniper rifle. Chen's weapon is the only thing that can reach that ridge." "Then go get it," Rennick said. His voice was strange, almost eager. Nadia looked at him, and in that moment she knew. The phone calls, the transmissions, the smile when the attack began. Rennick had sold them out. Rennick had led them into this trap, and now he was waiting for the trap to close. She opened her mouth to speak, to accuse, to expose him. But what would it change? They were still pinned down, still dying, still 90 minutes from rescue that might never come. Chen's rifle gleamed in the fading light. Her promise echoed in her memory. And somewhere on the south ridge, the enemy sniper chambered another round. Doc Yaboa was the one who finally asked the question no one else would voice. He had finished stabilizing Ostrowski and was checking his remaining supplies when he looked directly at Nadia. "You've been staring at that rifle for 20 minutes. Why?" The question cut through her defenses like a blade. She looked away, but Doc was not finished. "I saw you with those contractors yesterday. The way you handled them. The way you moved through the ambush, like you knew exactly where to be. And just now, counting ammunition, calculating rates of fire." He paused. "Who are you really, Okonkwo?" Calhoun was listening now. So were the others. The room had gone quiet except for the distant crack of occasional gunfire. "I'm a logistics specialist. Her voice sounded hollow even to herself. I carry things. Doc shook his head. I've served with logistics specialists for 6 years. They don't move like you. They don't think like you. He pointed at the window. And they don't stare at a sniper rifle like it's a lost piece of their soul. The silence stretched. Nadia felt the weight of their eyes, the pressure of their desperation. These men were going to die. She was going to die with them. And the only thing that could change that was sitting 400 meters away, covered in the blood of the only person here who had treated her like a human being. My father was Senior Chief Ezra Okonkwo. The words came out before she could stop them. 18 years with the teams. He trained me to shoot before I could write my own name. Calhoun's expression shifted. Okonkwo. I knew that name. He was a legend. Retired maybe 10 years back. 11 years. After what happened? What happened? The room waited. Outside, another burst of gunfire. Another probe. The enemy was getting bolder, sensing weakness. I shot my brother. Nadia's voice was flat, emptied of everything. Un accident. I was 19, 3 months from Olympic trials for precision rifle. Ranked 4th in the nation. She swallowed. I put a bullet through his spine. He's been in a wheelchair ever since. No one spoke. Doc's face had softened into something that might have been understanding. Even Calhoun looked shaken. I promised him I would never pull a trigger again. Nadia finally met their eyes. I've kept that promise for 10 years. Through boot camp, through deployments, through everything. It's all I have left. Calhoun processed this for a long moment. Then he spoke carefully. You're telling me you could use that rifle, that you could take out that sniper. I could, but you won't. She thought of Kofi's face, his forgiveness, the weight of the promise that had defined her existence for a decade. I can't. Another shot from the ridge. Another cry of pain. Calhoun cursed and moved toward the sound, leaving Nadia alone with Document. The medic knelt beside her, his voice low. I had a patient once. Young Marine. Lost both legs to an IED. He made his wife promise never to leave him alone, no matter what. She kept that promise for 3 years. Stayed by his side through everything. He looked at Nadia steadily. Then he killed himself, and she realized she'd kept a promise to a man who didn't exist anymore. The man she made the promise to died on that road, in Fallujah. What's your point? Doc stood. Promises are made by who we were. Sometimes who we become has to break them. He moved to help the latest casualty, leaving Nadia with his words. She crawled to the window again. Chen's body. The rifle. 400 meters of death between here and there. She could see the south ridge now, could almost feel where the enemy sniper had positioned himself. Her father's training whispered the calculations. Elevation, windage, distance. The geometry of death that had once been as natural to her as breathing. The shooting accident had not been a failure of skill. That was what haunted her most. Her mechanics had been perfect. Sight picture, breath control, trigger squeeze. Flawless. The bullet went exactly where she aimed it. She had simply aimed at the wrong target. For 10 years, she had told herself the problem was the rifle, the shooting, the act itself. But Doc's words cracked something open inside her. The problem had never been her ability to shoot. The problem was that she had stopped looking before she pulled the trigger. She had been so eager to prove herself, so confident in her skills, so certain that her training made her infallible. She had seen movement and reacted without thinking, without confirming, without being absolutely certain of her target. That was the sin, not the shooting, the arrogance. Nadia looked at the dying men around her, at Doc working desperately to save lives, at Calhoun fighting a battle he could not win, at Ostrowski, pale and shaking, thinking about a 3-year-old daughter he might never see again. She knew exactly what she was looking at now. She had confirmed her targets. She had identified the enemy. There was no ambiguity, no uncertainty, no chance of mistake. Her father's voice echoed from 15 years ago. The rifle is just a tool. What matters is the person holding it. Their judgment, their discipline, their willingness to take responsibility for every round they fire. She had spent 10 years refusing that responsibility, hiding from it, burying herself in ammunition crates and logistics reports so she would never have to face it again. But responsibility did not care about promises. Responsibility cared about results. She stood up. Doc noticed immediately. "What are you doing?" Nadia walked to where Chen's backup ammunition had been stored. She picked up a magazine, checked it, and tucked it into her vest. "I'm going to get that rifle." Calhoun spun around. "That's suicide. You'll never make it across that ground." She met his eyes. "Then cover me." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Calhoun nodded slowly. Something in his expression had changed. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Give her everything we've got," he ordered. On her signal, Nadia moved to the door. 400 meters. The same distance as that morning in Texas. The same distance that had destroyed her life and her brother's future. This time, she would not miss. This time, she would be certain. She took a breath, squeezed her eyes shut, let go of the promise she had carried for 10 years. "Kofi," she whispered, "forgive me again." Then she ran. The first 10 meters were the longest of her life. Nadia sprinted from the doorway into open ground, her legs pumping, her lungs already burning. Behind her, Calhoun's team opened up with everything they had, pouring suppressive fire toward the ridgelines. Bullets snapped past her head. Dirt kicked up at her feet. The enemy had seen her, understood what she was doing, and every rifle on that ridge swung toward the lone figure racing across the killing ground. She ran the way her father had taught her. Not in a straight line. Zigzag. Random. Never let them predict where you'll be when they pull the trigger. The math of survival calculated in milliseconds. 50 meters. A round tugged at her sleeve, drawing a line of fire across her forearm. She did not slow down. 100 meters. The suppressive fire from the compound was slackening. They were running low, conserving what little remained. The enemy volume increased. 150 meters. Her legs screamed. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel with Chen's body at the end. The rifle. The rifle. The rifle. 200 meters. Halfway. A burst of automatic fire stitched the ground ahead of her, and she dove left, rolled, came up running. Something hot grazed her hip. Still not stopping. The enemy sniper on the south ridge had found her. She could feel his scope tracking her movement, calculating her path, waiting for the moment she committed to a direction. One clean shot, and this was over. She did the only thing that made sense. She stopped being predictable. Instead of continuing toward Chen's position, she cut hard right toward a cluster of boulders she had spotted during her run. The sniper's round cracked past her left ear, missing by inches. He had anticipated her continuing forward. Her father's voice again. "Be water. Float around the bullet." She crashed into the boulders, gasping, bleeding from the arm and hip, heart slamming against her ribs. 220 meters covered. 180 to go. And now the enemy knew exactly where she was. The gunfire intensified. Rounds sparked off the rocks around her, showering her with fragments. She pressed herself flat and tried to breathe. Think. Her father's training demanded clarity even in chaos. The enemy sniper has your position. He'll be adjusting, waiting for you to move. The others are focused on the compound. You have maybe 15 seconds before he repositions for a clear shot. 15 seconds. She looked at the ground between her position and Chen's body. Open. Exposed. No cover for the final 180 meters. Suicide, Calhoun had said. He was right. But she had not come this far to die behind a rock. She burst from cover at an angle the sniper would not expect, sprinting not toward Chun, but parallel to the ridge, forcing the shooter to track laterally. His round missed wide. She cut back toward Chun, using her momentum to carry her through the turn. 100 meters left. 80. 60. The compound team had found reserves of ammunition somewhere. A renewed burst of covering fire raked the ridge lines, forcing heads down. Thank you, Calhoun. 40 meters. She could see Chen's face now, peaceful in death, eyes still open to the Afghan sky. The rifle lay beside him, stock dark with his blood. 20 meters. 10. She dove the final distance, sliding across loose rock and scrub until she collided with Chen's body. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. For a moment she lay there, pressed against a dead man who had shown her kindness, his blood soaking into her uniform. "I'm sorry." She whispered it into his unhearing ear. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." Then she took the rifle. The weight was familiar, terrifying and familiar. The SR-25, a weapon she had trained with under her father's supervision a lifetime ago. Semi-automatic, effective range 800 meters, 20-round magazine. Chen had maybe 12 rounds left. 12 rounds. 12 enemies. No margin for error. She rolled into a prone position, using Chen's body as partial cover. The scope came to her eye, and the world narrowed to a circle of magnified clarity. The enemy sniper first. He was the most dangerous, the one who had killed Chen and Harmon and would kill her if she gave him half a chance. She scanned the south ridge, looking for the telltale signs. Disturbed vegetation. Unnatural shadows. The glint of glass or metal. There, 400 meters. A slight depression in the rocks, perfect for concealment. She could see the barrel of his rifle protruding just slightly, tracking toward her position. They saw each other at the same moment. Two shooters 400 meters apart, each knowing only one would survive the next 3 seconds. Nadia's breathing slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. 10 years of rust fell away like dead skin, revealing the shooter underneath. The Olympic hopeful. The junior national champion. The daughter of Senior Chief Ezra Okonkwo. She did not think about Kofi. Did not think about the promise. Did not think about anything except the crosshairs settling on center mass and the gentle pressure of her finger on the trigger. Squeeze. Don't pull. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The enemy sniper's head snapped back, a red mist marking where he had been. The compound went quiet. Even the enemy fighters paused, processing what had just happened. Calhoun's voice broke the silence over the radio. Who made that shot? Nadia chambered another round and found her next target. She did not answer. She was too busy doing the thing she had promised never to do again. The thing she was born to do. The second shot came 3 seconds after the first. An RPG gunner on the East Ridge had been preparing to fire on the compound. Nadia put a round through his chest before he could shoulder the weapon. The unfired rocket tumbled down the slope, useless. The third shot dropped a fighter who had broken cover to reposition. He fell mid-stride, dead before he understood what had happened. Inside the compound, Calhoun watched through cracked binoculars. His voice came over the radio, stripped of its usual arrogance. That's 3 confirmed kills in under 20 seconds. Who the hell is she? Doc answered without looking up from his patient. Her father was Senior Chief Okonkwo, 18 years with the teams. Static silence. Then Calhoun again. The Okonkwo, the one they called the surgeon? The same. Nadia heard none of this. Her world had compressed to the scope, the crosshairs, the rhythm of breath and heartbeat that her father had drilled into her before she was old enough to understand what she was learning. Target acquisition, range estimation, wind calculation, squeeze. Fourth shot, a machine gunner setting up a crew-served weapon. His assistant tried to take over. Fifth shot, the enemy fighters were scrambling now, abandoning their prepared positions, seeking cover from a threat they had not anticipated. Their ambush had been designed to overwhelm a team with no long-range capability. No one had told them about the ammunition bearer. Nadia scanned for her next target and found something else instead. Rennick. He had left the compound building and was moving toward the courtyard, staying low, working his way toward the western wall. Away from the fight, away from the team, toward an escape route she had not noticed before. A drainage ditch that ran along the compound's perimeter and disappeared into a ravine. He was running. The man who had sold them out was using the chaos of battle to disappear. She tracked him through the scope, her finger resting on the trigger. One shot. Justice delivered. No one would question it in the confusion. But she was not an executioner. She was a shooter. And shooters followed rules of engagement even when everything inside them screamed for vengeance. Rennick, she said into the radio. Western Wall. He's running. Calhoun's response was immediate. Say again? Rennick sold us out. The phone calls. The transmissions. He told them we were coming. She kept her scope on the fleeing senior chief. He's trying to escape through the drainage ditch. A long pause. Then Calhoun's voice, cold as mountain ice. I'm on it. Nadia returned her attention to the ridgelines. 7 enemy fighters remained. They had gone to ground, hiding behind rocks and in depressions, unwilling to expose themselves to her rifle. A standoff. But standoffs favored the defender, and every minute that passed brought QRF closer. Movement at the compound's western wall. Calhoun had intercepted Rennick at the drainage ditch. Even from 400 meters, Nadia could see the confrontation unfolding. Rennick's hands raised. Calhoun's rifle leveled. Words exchanged that she could not hear. Then Rennick moved. Fast, desperate, going for his sidearm. Calhoun was faster. He drove the stock of his rifle into Rennick's face, dropping him to the dirt. A moment later, flex cuffs secured the traitor's wrist behind his back. Secure, Calhoun reported. Rennick is in custody. One problem solved. 7 more on the ridge lines, waiting for her to make a mistake. Nadia shifted position, using Chin's body as cover while she scanned for targets. The enemy had adapted. They knew her location now, knew her capabilities. They would not make the same mistakes twice. A burst of automatic fire raked her position. Rock fragments sliced her cheek. She pressed herself flat, tasting blood. Returned fire from the compound. Calhoun's team was back in the fight, emboldened by the shift in momentum. But they were still low on ammunition, still pinned, still vulnerable. One of the enemy fighters made a decision. He broke from cover and sprinted toward a better position, gambling that Nadia was suppressed. She was not. 6 shot. He fell. But the movement had been a distraction. While she tracked him, 2 others had repositioned. Muzzle flashes from a new angle. Rounds snapping past her head. She rolled right, came up in a new position, and found herself staring at Rennick's face through her scope. Calhoun had left him secured against the western wall while returning to the defense. The traitor was conscious now, watching her with something like hatred. His lips moved. Even at this distance, she could read them. You should have let me go. She shifted her aim past him, found a fighter who had repositioned to the north, and fired. 7th shot. 7 down. 5 enemies remaining. 5 rounds in her magazine. No margin for error. The sun was beginning to set, painting the valley in shades of orange and red. Beautiful and terrible. In the fading light, the enemy would have advantages. Thermal signatures. Night vision. The darkness that had always favored the attacker. She had maybe 30 minutes before the light failed completely. 30 minutes to end this. Doc's voice crackled over the radio. Westbrook stable, but I'm losing Ostrowski. The tourniquet's been on too long. He needs evac in the next hour, or he loses the leg. Maybe more. 1 hour. 5 enemies. 5 rounds. Nadia settled behind the scope and waited for someone to make a mistake. She did not have to wait long. The 8th shot missed. Nadia watched the round spark off rock 2 inches from her target's head. The fighter dove back into cover, untouched. Her hands were trembling now, the adrenaline that had carried her this far beginning to exact its price. Blood from her cheek dripped onto the rifle stock. Her hip throbbed where the bullet had grazed her during the run. 4 rounds left. 5 enemies remaining. She closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe. Her father's voice, calm and steady from 1,000 training sessions. The rifle doesn't know you're tired. Only you know. Lie to it. When she opened her eyes, her hands were still. The enemy fighters had recognized their opportunity. Her miss had given them hope, proof that she was human, fallible, exhausted. They began to move, coordinating through hand signals and short bursts of covering fire. Flanking maneuver. They were trying to get close enough that her rifle's range advantage would disappear. Calhoun saw it too. They're moving on her position. She needs support. We don't have the ammunition, someone responded. Then we improvise. Nadia tracked the nearest fighter through her scope. He was using the terrain expertly, never exposing himself for more than a second. Professional. Trained. Not some village militia with borrowed rifles. These were experienced fighters who had set this trap with precision. She waited. Patience was the sniper's greatest weapon, her father had always said. Let them make the mistake. Let them think you've lost them. The fighter reached a boulder 40 meters from her position and paused, preparing for his final rush. He would break cover, close the distance, and end this at close range where her rifle became a liability. He took a breath, steadied himself, burst from cover. Nadia's ninth shot caught him center mass. He crumpled without a sound. For enemies, 3 rounds. The mathematics were unforgiving now. She could not afford another miss. Every shot had to count. Movement from the compound. Calhoun and 2 other SEALs were pushing out, using her suppression of the ridgeline to advance. They carried captured enemy weapons, AK-47s scavenged from the courtyard. Not their preferred tools, but functional. Doc's voice on the radio. "What are you doing? Get back inside." "Ending this," Calhoun replied. "She bought us time. Now we use it." The flanking maneuver reversed. Now it was the SEALs moving to envelop the remaining enemy fighters, using the terrain that had been used against them. Nadia provided overwatch, tracking movement, waiting for clear shots. The light was fading faster now, shadows stretching across the valley like grasping fingers. Minutes mattered. One of the enemy fighters panicked. He broke from his position and ran for the ravine that offered escape from the valley. A bad decision born of fear. 10th shot. He fell at the ravine's edge. 3 enemies. 2 rounds. The remaining fighters understood their situation now. Trapped between a sniper they could not reach and a flanking force they could not stop. One of them shouted something in Pashto. A command or a prayer, Nadia could not tell. They made their choice. All 3 rose from cover simultaneously and charged toward Calhoun's position, weapons blazing. A final desperate assault. Take as many with them as they could. Nadia tracked the lead fighter. Fired. 11th shot. He dropped. She swung to the second. Fired. 12th shot. Down. The 3rd fighter was still coming, rifle raised, screaming something she could not understand. Calhoun's team opened up with their captured AKs, but the men kept running, kept firing, driven by something beyond self-preservation. Click. Empty magazine. Nadia's hands moved before her mind caught up. Magazine release. The empty mag fell away. Chin's backup ammunition, the magazine she had grabbed before leaving the compound. She slammed it home, chambered around, found the charging fighter in her scope. He was 15 meters from Calhoun, close enough to see the whites of his eyes. 13th shot. The fighter pitched forward and slid to a stop at Calhoun's feet. Silence fell across the valley. No gunfire, no screaming, just the wind and the fading light and the sound of men breathing who had not expected to survive. Calhoun's voice came over the radio, rough with emotion. "Clear. All targets down." Nadia lowered the rifle and let her forehead rest against the cool metal of the scope. Her body was shaking now, the adrenaline draining away and leaving nothing but exhaustion and pain. 12 confirmed kills. 400 meters average engagement distance. While wounded, after 10 years without firing a shot, she had done the impossible. Doc's voice cut through the static. "QRF inbound, 15 minutes. I need that bird on the ground immediately." Ostrowski's crashing. Nadia pushed herself up. The battle was over, but the mission was not complete. Ostrowski was dying. Westbrook needed surgery. Rennick needed to face justice. And she needed to figure out who she was now that the promise she had built her life around lay shattered on an Afghan mountainside. She picked up Chin's rifle and began the long walk back to the compound. The walk back to the compound took forever and no time at all. Nadia moved on autopilot, rifle slung across her back, her wounds announcing themselves with every step. The graze on her hip had opened wider during the firefight. Blood soaked through her uniform and ran down her leg in warm rivulets. Calhoun met her at the perimeter. For a long moment, he just looked at her, this woman he had mocked and belittled for 3 months. The pack mule, the logistics specialist, the invisible burden carrier who had just saved every life in his team. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Several, actually. Later." Nadia pushed past him. "How's Ostrowski?" "Doc's working on him." "It's bad." She found Doc Yaboa in the main building, hands bloody to the elbows, face tight with concentration. Ostrowski lay on a makeshift stretcher, his skin the color of old paper. The tourniquet had been on too long. His leg was dying, and the rest of him might follow. "What do you need?" Nadia asked. "A surgical suite and about 4 pints of Onegative." Doc did not look up. Failing that, a helicopter in the next 10 minutes. The sound of rotors answered him, faint at first, then growing, the distinctive thump of military helicopters approaching fast. QRF was finally here. The next few minutes blurred into organized chaos. Medical evacuation teams poured from the birds before they fully touched down. Ostrowski was loaded first, Doc climbing in beside him, still working. Westbrook followed, conscious now but pale, his shoulder wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. Rennick came last. 2 military police officers hauled him to his feet and marched him toward a separate helicopter. He passed within arm's reach of Nadia, close enough that she could smell his sweat and fear. "You think this changes anything?" His voice was a hiss. "You're still nobody, still the pack mule. They'll forget what you did here before the week is out." Nadia met his eyes. "Maybe, but you'll remember. Every day in Leavenworth. You'll remember that the woman you dismissed is the one who stopped you." Something flickered in his face. Fear, maybe, or the beginning of understanding that his life, as he knew it, was over. The MPs dragged him away. Calhoun appeared at her shoulder as the helicopters lifted off. "You need medical attention. I'm Fina. You're bleeding through your uniform and you can barely stand." He took her arm, not roughly but firmly. That wasn't a suggestion. The field medic who examined her was young, professional, and clearly struggling to reconcile the woman in front of him with the stories already spreading through the QRF team. "You're the one who made those shots?" He cleaned the wound on her hip, his movements careful. 400 meters with iron sights? The rifle had a scope. Nadia winced as he applied antiseptic. And it was Chen's weapon. He deserved the credit. "Chen's dead." The medic's voice was gentle. "The credit goes to whoever pulled the trigger." She had no response to that. The base at FOB Sharana looked different when they returned. Word had spread ahead of them, carried by radio chatter and the hungry speed of military gossip. Soldiers lined the landing zone, watching as the helicopters touched down. Watching her, Nadia climbed out on unsteady legs, exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced. She wanted a shower, a bed, and about 16 hours of unconsciousness. What she got was a crowd. They did not cheer. Military personnel rarely did. But they watched with something she had never seen directed at her before. Respect. Recognition. The acknowledgement of a peer who had proven herself under fire. A senior officer pushed through the crowd. Colonel Wade, the base commander, a man Nadia had never spoken to directly. He stopped in front of her and studied her face for a long moment. "Petty Officer Okonkwo." "Sir, I've been reading the after-action reports as they come in. 12 confirmed kills. Exposed run across 400 meters of open ground under fire. Identification of an intelligence leak that may connect to multiple previous ambushes." He paused. "Is there anything in those reports that's inaccurate?" "No, sir." He nodded slowly. "There are going to be people who want to talk to you. Important people. This kind of performance doesn't go unnoticed. I was just doing my job, sir. Your job is logistics specialist. What you did today was something else entirely." He stepped back. "Get some rest, petty officer. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." The crowd parted as Nadia walked toward the barracks. She felt their eyes on her back, heard the whispers that followed in her wake. The pack mule, the ammunition bearer, the woman who had done the impossible. She stopped at Chen's quarters on the way to her own. Someone had already begun packing his belongings, the impersonal efficiency of military death processing. His photos were stacked on the bed, his books boxed, his life reduced to inventory items. Nadia stood in the doorway and let herself feel the loss. Chen had been kind to her when kindness cost him nothing. He had seen her as a person when everyone else saw a function. He had died never knowing what she was capable of, never knowing that his faith in her had been more justified than either of them realized. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room, "for seeing me." Then she walked to her own quarters, closed the door, and finally allowed herself to fall apart. The next 24 hours passed in fragments. Nadia slept, woke, slept again, her body demanding recovery while her mind churned with images she could not escape. Chen's peaceful face, Rennick's hatred, the crosshairs settling on target after target. 12 lives ended by her hand. She had broken her promise. The thought circled like a vulture, patient and persistent. 10 years of penance, erased in 30 minutes of violence. She did not know how to feel about that. Did not know if she was allowed to feel anything at all. The knock on her door came at 0900. An NCIS agent, professional and polite, requesting her presence for a formal debrief. She followed him to an interrogation room that had been converted into something slightly less hostile, coffee and water bottles arranged on the table like peace offerings. The questions lasted 4 hours. Every detail of the mission, from insertion to extraction. Every observation about Rennick's behavior. Every shot she had taken, reconstructed and analyzed and documented for the official record. She told them everything. The phone calls, the transmissions, the smile on Rennick's face when the ambush began, the confrontation when she accused him, his threat, his attempted escape, his words to her as the MPs dragged him away. When it was over, the lead investigator leaned back in his chair and studied her. Senior Chief Rennick has been cooperative. He's provided names, dates, methods. The contractor he was working with has connections to 6 previous ambushes over the past 18 months. 6 ambushes. Nadia absorbed the number. How many casualties? 14 dead, 23 wounded. The investigator's voice was flat. Before yesterday, she thought of Chun, of Harmon, of the men lying in the courtyard who never had a chance. Rennick had not just betrayed his team. He had been betraying the entire theater of operations for a year and a half. What happens to him? Court-martial, life sentence, minimum, possibly death penalty, given the scope. The investigator paused. Your testimony will be crucial. I'll testify. He nodded and made a note. One more thing. Your file says you qualified as marksman. Basic level. Nothing special. Nadia said nothing. The investigator almost smiled. We both know that's not accurate. Would you like to explain the discrepancy? I didn't want to be a shooter. I chose logistics for a reason. And now? She had no answer for that. The hospital was quieter than she expected. Ostrowski lay in a bed near the window, his leg heavily bandaged but still attached. The surgeons had worked through the night to save it. Whether he would walk again remained uncertain, but he was alive. His daughter would see him again. His eyes opened as she approached. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by blood loss and trauma, and the morphine drip feeding into his arm. Okonkwo. His voice was a whisper. I heard what you did. She pulled a chair close to his bed. I heard you have a daughter. 3 years old. Lily. He managed something like a smile. She's out my eyes. Her mom's attitude. You're going to see her again. That's what matters. Ostrowski's hand found hers, his grip weak but insistent. I was terrible to you. Calhoun and me. The things we said. I know. I'm sorry. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. I'm so sorry. Nadia squeezed his hand. I forgive you. She meant it. The anger she had carried for 3 months had burned away somewhere on that mountainside, consumed by something larger than petty cruelties and locker room mockery. These men had watched her haul ammunition and seen nothing. Now they saw everything. That would have to be enough. Doc Yaboa found her in the hallway outside Westbrook's room. The commander was awake and asking for her, but Doc intercepted her first. I need to say something. He leaned against the wall, exhaustion written in every line of his face. What I told you in that building, about promises and who we become. I wasn't sure if it was right. If I should push you. Nadia waited. But you saved us. All of us. Doc shook his head. I've been a combat medic for 8 years. I've seen a lot of people die and a lot of people live. But I've never seen anything like what you did. I just did what I was trained to do. No. Doc held her gaze. You did what you were born to do. There's a difference. Westbrook was sitting up when she entered, his shoulder immobilized, but his eyes clear. He gestured to the chair beside his bed. Okonkwo, I owe you my life. The lives of my men. Sir, don't sir me. He shifted, wincing. I've been on the radio with JSOC for the past 2 hours. They've seen the helmet camera footage. They've read the after-action reports. He paused. They want you. Want me for what? Advanced training. Assessment for possible attachment to Tier 1 units. He watched her reaction. You have a gift, Okonkwo. The kind that doesn't come along often. They want to develop it. Nadia thought of her promise. Of Kofi. of 10 years spent hiding from who she was. Can I think about it? Westbrook nodded. Take whatever time you need. But Okonkwo, he waited until she met his eyes. Whatever you decide, know that what you did out there matters. You didn't just save lives. You exposed a traitor who was getting Americans killed. That's worth something. That's worth everything. She left the hospital with his words echoing in her mind. Outside, the Afghan sun was setting again, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Beautiful country for such ugly work. She found a quiet corner and pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number she knew by heart. The voice that answered was warm and familiar and shattered something inside her chest. Nadia? Kofi's voice. Her little brother, forever 19 in her memory, but a grown man now. Is everything okay? She closed her eyes. No. Yes. I need to tell you something. The silence on the line stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Kofi spoke, his voice careful and calm. Tell me. So she did. Everything. The ambush. The deaths. Chen's kindness and Chen's end. The rifle she had sworn never to touch. The 12 shots that had saved her team and shattered the promise that had defined her existence for a decade. When she finished, the silence returned. Nadia pressed the phone against her ear and waited for judgment. You broke your promise. Kofi's words were soft. The promise you made me in the hospital. Yes. The promise you kept for 10 years. Through everything. Yes. Another pause. Then something she did not expect. Laughter. Quiet at first, then fuller. The sound of genuine joy traveling across continents and oceans to reach her. Kofi. She did not understand. Why are you laughing? Because I've been waiting for this call for 10 years. His voice cracked with emotion. Nadia, do you have any idea how much it hurt to watch you bury yourself? To see you hide from who you are because of what happened to me? I shot you. I paralyzed you. You made a mistake. A terrible mistake that changed both our lives. But the mistake wasn't being a shooter, Nadia. The mistake was being 19 and overconfident and human. He took a breath. I forgave you the moment I woke up in that hospital. I've been waiting for you to forgive yourself. The tears came then, silent and unstoppable, running down her cheeks and dripping onto the dusty Afghan ground. 10 years of guilt, 10 years of penance, 10 years of carrying a weight that her brother had never asked her to bear. I don't know how. Her voice broke. I don't know how to forgive myself. Then let me help you. Kofi's voice was steady. You saved lives, Nadia. 12 enemies who would have killed your friends. A traitor who was getting Americans murdered. You used the gift Dad gave you, the gift you were born with, and you did something good with it. Something important. I broke my promise. Promises are made by who we were. His words echoed Doc's, a strange symmetry that felt like fate. Sometimes who we become has to break them. I don't want her guilt anymore, big sister. I never did. I want you to live. Really live. Not this half-existence you've been hiding in. Nadia wiped her face with her sleeve, tasting salt and dust. There are people who want to train me. Special operations. The kind of work Dad used to do. What do you want? The question cut through everything. Not what she should do. Not what would atone for past sins. What she wanted. I want to matter. The words came from somewhere deep. I want what I can do to mean something. I want to save lives, not just carry ammunition for people who save lives. Then do that. Kofi's voice held nothing but love. Stop punishing yourself for being exceptional. Stop hiding from who you are. Be the shooter Dad raised. Be the person I've always known you could become. She stayed on the phone with him for another hour, talking about nothing and everything. His job at the nonprofit he had founded for disabled veterans. His girlfriend, a physical therapist named Maya, who made him laugh. His life, full and rich and meaningful despite the wheelchair, because of the wheelchair, transformed by tragedy into something neither of them had expected. When she finally hung up, the sun had fully set. Stars blazed overhead in the clear mountain air, more than she had ever seen in Texas. A reminder that the universe was vast and her pain was small and life continued whether she participated or not. She found Colonel Wade's office and knocked. The commander who met with her the following morning was not from the regular chain of command. He wore no insignia, offered no name, and spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who operated in spaces that did not officially exist. I've reviewed everything. He slid a folder across the table. 12 confirmed kills at an average distance of 400 meters. Exposed movement across open ground under fire. Target identification and engagement while wounded. He looked up. In my 23 years of service, I've seen perhaps 5 people capable of what you did. 2 of them are dead. 1 is retired. 1 works for me. And the 5th? He almost smiled. The 5th is sitting across from me, pretending she's not exceptional. The offer was everything Westbrook had hinted at and more. Advanced sniper training at a facility she had never heard of. Assessment for attachment to units that did not appear in any official documentation. A chance to use her abilities in service of something larger than herself. I need to know one thing. Nadia met his eyes. Will what I do save lives? The people we target are responsible for American deaths. Civilian deaths. The kind of evil that doesn't respond to diplomacy or economic pressure. He leaned forward. Yes, what you do will save lives. Directly. Measurably. Significantly. She thought of Chun, who had seen her as a person. Of Doc, who had given her permission to become someone new. Of Kofi, who had carried her guilt for 10 years and finally handed it back. I'll take it. The words felt like a door opening, like a promise fulfilled rather than broken, like the first breath of a new life built on the ashes of the old. 1 week later, Nadia stood at Chen's memorial service, surrounded by the team she had saved. Calhoun stood beside her, no longer an antagonist, but something approaching a friend. Doc caught her eye and nodded. Ostrowski watched from his wheelchair, his daughter's photograph clutched in his healing hands. When her turn came to speak, she placed something on the small shrine they had built. Her Junior Nationals medal, the gold disc she had carried for 10 years as a reminder of who she used to be. You saw me when no one else did. She spoke quietly, words meant for Chun alone. You believed in me before I believed in myself. I'm going to spend the rest of my career making sure that belief was justified. She stepped back. The medal glinted in the Afghan sun. A piece of her past laid to rest so her future could begin. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments what part resonated most. Maybe you know someone who found redemption in an unexpected place, or someone whose hidden gifts changed everything. We would love to hear your story. Nadia Okonkwo walked away from the memorial and toward the helicopter waiting to take her to her new life. She had not looked back. She had spent 10 years looking back. It was time to look forward.